Mention before we start, since I know a lot of you have flights throughout the morning, I wanted to mention that we're going to be, next week, by the way, we're going to be in Austin doing our Brand Insider Summit, focusing on the direct-to-consumer channel. So we're going to have brands like Quip toothbrush there, Hubble Contacts, Ancestry.com, a lot of the big hits in the D2C space that have emerged over the last couple of years. They'll be there talking about how they've been leveraging the various marketing channels and how they're moving up to scale. I say that only because we're sort of all booked up there. It's a really popular topic, but we'll be live streaming it. So if you're interested in it, go to MediaPost.com and click on the event, and you'll be able to see a lot of this stuff. We're going to be talking to some great folks. I'm doing an interview with the head of marketing at Quip. We're going to be talking to the head of marketing for Coppola Wineries. Like I said, we're going to have Hubble there. We're going to have Ancestry.com. Farmer's Dog, which is a really cool company if you want to see customized dog food. They've got a story that's unbelievable. So there's I think one of the things that I really love about that event, and I think any marketer will appreciate this, is the refreshing perspective that this group of companies that's emerged in the last few years brings to marketing. They have a real passion for their product, and it comes through when you talk with them. And I think it'll come through if you watch the stream and see this. I'm really looking forward to this. And also, the videos from this event will be posted by probably by the end of today. So if you go back to the agenda, we should be posting videos for all of the sessions, so you can refer to them, share them if you like. And also a reminder that we're in the middle of programming the next set of Insider Summits that we'll be doing in late April and early May on Captiva Island, the Search and Performance Summit, and the Data and Programmatic Summit, which intersects, I think, with a lot of what some of you do, but also if you have colleagues, bring them to me. We'll also be doing the second edition for 2019 of the TV and Video Insider Summit in October. So I would urge all of you who are interested to ping me if you have ideas. I really feed off of your notions and your ideas. A number of the sessions that we had this time were coming out of consultations that I had with past attendees of this summit. And I really jazz off of those ideas, and they really help me program. And case studies. I think this show works best when we have a lot of case studies, and I love to get the details. The kind of thing that Sonia did before, the kind of thing that Alyssa's going to do now. Really drilling into some of these campaigns and seeing how the metrics work, how they put the media together, how they worked across the screens, I think is really key. So if you have ideas for these, if you have clients who are willing to share them, and even anonymize them, for this event, we know that there are a lot of sensitivities about brands revealing some of the details of what they're doing. Let me know, because I really want to feature them. And of course, I want to thank all of our sponsors for this event. As I said, we really can't do this without them. They're underwriting all of this, and we love their support, and we love the fact that they let us practice independent journalism up here for 3-4 hours a day. So a shout out to everybody, to Beeswax, to DataZoo, to Spotify, to Gamut, to AMCN, to Canoe, to Kinetics, to Dish Media, to NCC Media, to Simplify, and to Simul Media. Thanks for all of your support. We really appreciate it. And finally today, first of all, there are a couple of things we're going to hear about today. First of all, we're going to talk about media and creative. But we're also going to do a deep dive into a topic that's been up here throughout, which is the political spending that went on in the last cycle, how it disrupted everybody's CPMs and everybody's media plans and buying patterns, but also some of the techniques that really go into that approach to data-driven advertising. We'll be doing that. We'll be wrapping with that. Before we get to that, though, a topic that I always love being able to feature when I have the substance to feature it, and that's the intersection of media and creative. You may notice that I titled our panel about bringing media and creative together, finally, no really this time. I'm somewhat of a jaded critic and media journalist. I've been covering this field for 25 years, and I've been hearing about how we need to get media and creative together, and whenever I do a panel on this stuff, all I get are people shaking their heads and saying, yeah, we got to get media, we got to get creative. creative in the media process earlier and higher up. So I stopped doing them. I put a halt to them a number of years ago. I'm tired of hearing people sitting up here spinning their wheels. But this time, I hear we really have people who can talk out of example and how it worked internally. But we're going to start with Alyssa Kramer, who is the video production manager, and she's coming out of the creative field rather than the media field to talk about the way in which she's using this at UPMC and using it for healthcare advertising. This is her passion, as you'll see, but the ways in which that they've been using a rather modest budget to drive video and to bring video and media together across a lot of different innovative platforms that they've been testing out. Please welcome Alyssa Kramer.
Hi there, good morning everybody. Happy day 3. This has been a really fantastic couple of days, and I've learned so much from our amazing speaker lineup, and it's been a pleasure talking to and getting to know so many of you guys being experts in the field. So I just want to thank MediaPost for putting on this fantastic event, and also thank you for inviting me to speak here today. All right. So, my name is Alyssa Kramer. I work for a company called UPMC, which stands for University of Pittsburgh Medical Center. We're a $19 billion corporation that is both a hospital provider and an insurance provider, and we're based in Pittsburgh, PA. And my role is I work on a creative team within the organization, and I oversee all of our in-house video production and photography. So I feel like I need to give a little disclaimer. Steve already told you that I'm coming at you today from a content creative side. So I'm a creative and not so much on the media side like all of you are. So I feel like a slight imposter here. But like I said, first and foremost, I'm a creative. I have a master's degree in media production, and my day-to-day responsibilities have included anything from concept creation to script writing to storyboarding to actually shooting, directing, hiring talent, you name it, budget management. We do everything from that to editing, packaging up, and then we typically hand it over to the media team and then, never hear or see from it again. So as my role has evolved, over the past 5 years that I've been there, it has changed from being this more like boots on the ground content creator and shifting more into, I've built out a small team, so now I manage a team of content creators, and my responsibilities have shifted into more of the higher level strategic planning, and now dipping my toes into this media buying and planning industry. So my goal today is to share with you my perspective as a creator and how I've learned and how I'm still learning to be more strategic in developing video content based on what I'm learning from the media side. I feel like this is like a little laser, I can point at that. So a little bit about my company so you can understand the industry that I work for and the type of products and services that we sell. UPMC is this, like I said, big corporation. We have a hospital system, and then we have insurance. And it's broken down into divisions, and one of those is health insurance, and that's the side that I'm on. So we have we're almost at 3.5 million members. We have 5,600 employees. We're the largest medical insurer in Western Pennsylvania, and we are rapidly expanding across the state into central PA and into Philly, and we're shifting into New York and I think Ohio. And so that's the breakdown of my company. And then this is a quick org chart, and I'm just explaining this so you can get a sense of, even though we're health insurance, we have all these different products and lines of business that fall within the health plan. So we have government products like SNP, CHIP, Medicaid, Medicare. We have the commercial side of things, which is what you think of typically when you think of health insurance. It's like individual family plans, vision care, dental care. And then we have an entire workforce productivity side of things, and we offer products that integrate, employee productivity, employee wellness. We have an HR software company called eBenefits. So all of these different companies and lines of business, my team services. So in that sense, we function sort of like an in-house agency. So that's great, right? But who cares? Because today we're here to talk about video. So we've been producing our own video content in-house for the past 5 years, and most everything that comes out of our most everything that comes out of our digital advertising comes from our team. We rarely outsource our content creation, and we have built the team out in a way that aims to integrate storytelling with specific ad placement. So as we grow, we're trying to keep this concept in mind and structure it in a way that caters to that. So we also work with an outside agency who is primarily responsible for our media buying and planning. But at the end of the day, we manage our budget, we make the final strategic decisions, and work alongside them. And we are all digital, so just to be clear, I don't do anything with broadcast or TV or anything like that. We're a digital team, and we utilize a wide variety of platforms like OTT, pre-roll, YouTube, paid social, connected TV, probably a lot more that I'm forgetting. And because we're a digital team, we work with a ton of clients who don't understand the digital space and are even more skeptical of video. So we get a lot of questions like this, where like it's super simple, right? So I can't even tell you how many times I've been meeting with clients. Like it's more often than you would think, where we're going over their objectives and their audience and their goals, and I ask them, do you have a specific concept in mind? Are you looking for a specific type of video? And they'll be like, well, we were just thinking you can make us a viral video. And we're like, okay, do you want like 5 million views or 10 million views? Like, what would you like? And so we always get a kick out of this, but at the same time, it's a reminder to us, it's like a reality check that we have to constantly educate our clients on what it is that we do and also what it is that video marketing is. And video marketing, I think a lot of people, they're like, it's viral videos, but it can be, sure, but that's really not what it is. And I'll get into this a little bit later, but that's where creative partnering with media can help me there because it helps justify what video marketing actually is. So while we don't necessarily specialize in viral video making, we do tons of different types of concepts, anything from testimonials, narrative, instructional, demo, social media, pretty much every type of video I'm confident that we've produced. Like I said, our creative approach starts with the client. We talk to them about their objectives, their goals, what they're selling. We get to know their product. We consider the audience, where the video is going to live. Should it be optimized for mobile, for desktop, or for both? So these are the questions that we ask, and I believe that they're the right questions, but the problem is that with the gap that we have sometimes with the media side, we're not totally sure if we're right here, we're just kind of guessing. So we're not positive if the approach that we're taking is correct. And what we do know is that the digital advertising world is spread across a variety of platforms, and in this landscape, content has to take on many different forms. So that could be a long-form video series, it could be a 6-second pre-roll, it could be interactive media like a GIF or stop motion, or just basic branding content. Each media form brings a different mix of engagement and shareability, and we need to consider customizing how we create the content for each platform and each channel. So some examples of how we've done this. We understand that users engage with videos across screens, right? So whether that's a 360-degree video ad placement, which when we were trying to leverage this emerging platform when this was a thing, and it required us to basically take what we knew about storytelling and video creation and throw it out the window and start from scratch. And it was honestly like a nightmare, and I hope 360 never comes back or it goes away forever, but it was a big challenge to us, and it was us trying to stay trendy and current with what users were looking at and what was happening out in the field. So whether it's that or whether it's optimizing an app that we know our younger audience is highly engaged with, like Snapchat, and trying to design content specifically geared for that, filming in a vertical format instead of horizontal, using stop motion GIF animation as opposed to video, or if it's just optimizing a video content for Facebook. So designing concepts that can be watched with or without audio. So whether it's any of these concepts or any other type of concept, we have seen the need for a greater connection between the media placement and the way that we make the creative. Which brings, this question that I think that all of us ask us on a regular basis. Which comes first, the media or the creative? I had a professor of photography teach me once. He said that the worst way to approach photography is to go out and take 5,000 pictures and just hope that statistically something's gonna turn out. If you take 5,000 pictures, you're gonna be able to salvage like 5 to 10, right? You'll have something to deliver to the client. But that photographer is not gonna make much money, and they're not gonna be very successful or very talented. So what you need to learn to do is to shoot with purpose. Have a plan, know what you want, go out and shoot 50 really good pictures, and then choose 3 really, really good pictures to deliver, and that's the photographer that's gonna be successful. So at the end of the day, it should be quality over quantity. And I think the same thought process should apply to a creative team in the advertising industry. Effective video content strategy shouldn't necessarily be about volume, but it should be about precision. And I stand up here and say this to you, but I'm like a hypocrite because this is what I believe to be true, but at the end of the day, it's difficult to implement this into a business. I mean, nobody has time. And we work with our ad agency, but we're located in separate buildings. So in order for us to merge our industries, we have to like really make effort. And in the day-to-day, you get lost in that. So a lot of times we have no choice but to go with that former approach and just go out and shoot an overabundance in footage, come back and just hope that we can cut it up to fit whatever platform they decide to use. And that has saved us in a pinch, and it can work, but can it be better? I think it can. So I would argue that generally speaking, when you can, it's worth the effort to take the smarter approach, which is to learn what works and what doesn't work from what your media team is telling you, and then rather than creating it and trying to fit it into placements. And to me, that is where the actual power of media creative is. So I'm going to get into 2 case studies. And I chose these case studies because they were relatively recent. We did these this past fall, both of these campaigns. And just learning what I learned, taking the effort to sit down with our ad agency and the media team and going over the results, how influential it was from a creative standpoint to know these results. And so that's why I wanted to share this with you today, how just 2 campaigns was really influential and how I approach creative. So this first campaign was B2B lead generation. It's for a company called eBenefits, which is a human resources platform software that we sell. And our target audience were decision makers, HR managers, influencing employees. It ran for about 2 months. It was programmatic and pre-roll placement on our agency's DSP network. It was brand awareness and exposure. That was our goal going into this. We had no idea, like we weren't looking for leads. We were just looking for exposure and brand awareness and relying on other tactics to deliver leads. This video had a call to action there are 2 concepts. One of the videos had a call to action at the end, and the other didn't, but both videos linked to a site for them to encourage them to fill out a form for a free demo. So I'm going to show you these really quick. They're short videos. This is the first concept.
Your employees have a lot on their plate and a lot to balance. They have places to go, people to meet, and people to care for. That's why offering them an innovative benefits enrollment tool that's easy to use and provides decision-making support is a smart move. And when you can see instant reporting, communicate in real time, and more easily manage benefits administration, it's an even better time to have a seat at the HR table. Hi, we're eBenefits.
And here's the second one. Okay, so these were our results, and what immediately stood out to me and to our team and to the ad, we were all kind of shocked at this actually. What we went into intending to be an awareness and exposure campaign became a lead generating campaign. And it may not seem like a lot, but 25 leads is actually 25 companies. So 1 lead could equal 1,000 people. And this was just shocking to us because it wasn't our initial plan, but in general, we don't look at video typically as a lead generating revenue, like direct revenue generating tactic. It's more for us like a top funnel. So that was really shocking to us, and that's a really big deal to know that video marketing can actually be more of a lower funnel tactic that we can use. The other thing that's worth noting is that the concepts were relatively different. One was a more straightforward, almost demo approach, and the other was a little bit more abstract, like a little silly, like borderline funny. And pairing those 2 together to see how they performed was really interesting too, because I would always like to think like a funnier, sillier concept would win, but in this case, it wasn't. It was a more direct and like almost demo approach. So that's really good for us to know from a creative standpoint, because when we're developing content, we're just like, let's create the most fun one. But that's not always the best approach to do it. Sometimes you need to be more strategic. And if this is the audience that responds to direct, then then that's something you need to consider when you're creating content. And so if we do campaigns similar to this in the future with a similar audience, then we would keep this in mind. So the main takeaway from this case study for me and my team was to consider the concept and catering that to what the audience wants, and also understanding that video can be an effective way to generate leads. So the second case study I'm going to go over was an educational campaign. It was for something called short-term plans, which, just real quick, a short-term plan was released by the government this past fall, and basically they had a really appealing sticker price, and they're appealing to younger audiences and like millennials, trying to get them to switch out of their main plan, pay for these low premiums, but have very minimal coverage. And the minimal coverage part was like really fine print. So our company decided not to sell these plans, but we were fearful that we would lose this younger audience to these short-term plans. So we were asked to create an educational campaign, a series of videos that would appeal to a younger audience and tell them like, hey, it's cool if you want to switch. This is what a short-term plan is. This is what it covers, or this is what it does and does not cover. We want you to be sure of this because we care about you as our member, and we also don't want to lose your business. So we created 3 concepts, targeted the 18 to 35. It ran for about 6 weeks. All 3 concepts did. Pre-roll, programmatic. We did some paid social, I think. Again, educational awareness. The videos directly linked to a website of all resources, and they weren't resources we wrote. They were resources that we pulled from reputable sources. So it wasn't like us just trying to trick them, So our goal was just to have them complete the video, click through, and go to this website and read more. And I'm going to show you those 3 concepts real quick.
There are some areas where short-term fixes fall short. And short-term insurance plans may not always cover what you think they do. Low-cost short-term plans may not cover essential health benefits like screenings, behavioral health, and more, leaving your coverage stretched thin. Be sure to sign up for a plan that covers what you need it to. Sign up for complete coverage from UPMC Health Plan.
Second one.
A great deal on the outside can quickly turn into a bad bargain when important parts that should be included cost extra and expenses start adding up. Don't be fooled by a nice sticker price and deceiving monthly premium. With short-term insurance plans, you could be paying for essential health benefits and prescription drug costs out of pocket. Avoid limited coverage from a short-term insurance plan. Sign up for complete coverage from UPMC Health Plan.
And then the last one.
There are some things short-term insurance plans may not cover, like celebrations,
I'm pregnant! Oh! Where is the ketchup?
cravings, new pants, patience, or confidence.
Do I have this?
Even essentials like vitamins or screenings. Short-term plans may not cover essential health benefits. We do. Sign up for complete maternity coverage from UPMC Health Plan.
The biggest surprise out of these results was that they let us get away with borderline swearing. So all 3 concepts, the first thing I noticed when I looked at the results here were that all 3 concepts relatively performed the same. But I was also considering how we were measuring success. So based on how we were measuring success, which was to me, watching this video to completion, clicking through and viewing the webpage with more resources. Because to us, a potential member or current member doing that is more likely to be, interested in learning why short-term plans are a bad choice, which means they're closer to staying with us. And the third concept to me was the winner because it had the highest click-through rate. The first video had a lot more impressions, but still percentage-wise, the third concept did better with the click-through and also completed video views. But again, minimal. Another thing to note that's interesting is, again, the concept. And all of these concepts were slightly sillier and a little bit lighter, but they were still all different. And one thing that stood out to me is that the third concept that I'm pegging as the winner here was by far and away the highest production value. It took us 12 hours to film, weeks and weeks to plan. We hired talent. It was I want to say $15,000 to $20,000 more than the other 2 costs to produce. The other 2 were one I filmed at my house, and it took 2 hours, So by no means am I suggesting that higher production value always equals success, but in this case, it's worth looking into. It's worth asking. It's a question, I think, to consider when you're looking at results from your concepts. And the last thing that did stand out to me, which I'll get into in my next slide, was how audio performance was so low. So little people watch these concepts with audio. Speaking of, all the campaigns that we did, or both of these campaigns that I'm going over, the audio was so low. And this like made our jaws drop. And I don't know if we're just way behind the times. It's no secret that audio is going away with social media, and we've known that for a while. And we've optimized our content for social media in a way that can be viewed with or without audio. We use captions, or we design concepts that just don't need it. But we didn't realize this was happening on other platforms. And I'm not sure exactly where these videos went out. I just know they were on our DSP network. But we didn't know this. And I wouldn't have known this if I didn't meet with my media team and get these results. And this is really important from a creative person's standpoint, because we're spending, you have only so many tools when you're creating a concept, right? You have visual and you have audio. And without the audio, you're losing like 50% of your tools to work with. And if your team is spending all this money on writing these, motivational scripts and hiring voiceover actors and spending money to get that produced and licensing music and doing music mixes and paying for all this, that's a lot of time and money spent. And if people aren't watching, then what are we doing? That's a giant waste of time for everybody. So I definitely understand that these are only 2 small case studies and that this doesn't necessarily apply across the board, but this was very alarming to us, and this is something that we are noting to pay very close attention to going forward. And then another commonality between the 2 campaigns, which was also very strange to me, tablets, we always assume that desktop is where the action happens and mobile is where viewing happens, but according to these results, tablet is where action happened and desktop is where the completion happened, and mobile was actually the lowest performing. Again, could be an anomaly. These are just 2 case studies. We didn't have like millions and millions of impressions, so I'm not taking this to heart just yet, but it's just another thing to consider. Maybe we need to be customizing our content even more specifically for tablet or for mobile or for desktop. So just to wrap up, a few key takeaways I have. Media planning can help you build a better business case for video. And this takes me back to talking about viral videos with clients. And I also think Colleen from EA talked on Monday about how we're all experts in the field. We know what we're doing. We can make decisions based on intuition and intrinsic decisions. But that's not enough to show clients or to show your employer to justify for a new job. You have to be able to monetize video or measure its success. And when I'm explaining to clients why we can't just make them a viral video and why you don't even want that anyway, it helps me when I can say that and justify it with numbers. You want to align with the user journey, find out what they're doing on what devices and how they're reacting and what kind of content they're listening to. Do they like audio? Do they not like audio? Also noting that video can be a cost-effective lead generator, and maybe that's something to shift focus on. Track results. I don't remember why I put that, but track your results. Possibly goodbye forever to audio, but maybe not, hopefully not. That would be so sad for me, but and then last but not least, loop in your creative team. We want to know what you guys are doing. We don't want to take your jobs, we just want to understand them so we can figure out how to work better. When I first started this conference, I thought it'd be really funny to keep track of all the acronyms that I hear. And I literally lost count. I don't even know. There was I've got GRP, TRP, CTR, VTR, KPI, DAP. I lost count of them. So it's a confusing language for a creative team to speak, but it helps to start those conversations and to learn your language. So when your creative team is able to speak the language that you guys speak, we can be more strategic in concepting, which will hopefully lead to more effective video content, and that's beneficial to both parties. So that's all I have today, and thank you so much.
Thank you. We have time for questions. Anybody have questions for this?
Hi, Rebecca Kaplan with Cox Media. I love the catch-up on the banana. That was a banana, right?
Yes, it was.
Yeah, okay. So you said you are responsible purely for the digital side. So yes. Do you partner with your linear production team? Because a lot of those spots seem like they would play well on linear television as well.
You would think, yeah. And that may be something that is happening down the line. Right now, we're very separate. I think that we should be a little bit more merged than we are. But for whatever reason, we're entirely 2 different entities. If that answers your question. I wish we merged a little bit more.
Was any of this running across OTT, or was it all online? Or
I think
on
it
web?
was all online, although I was told that some of that could have gone into OTT, but I think it was just our DSP network.
And there was no there was no format differentiation across mobile, tablet.
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Okay.
Hi, how you doing? It's Josh Martin. I was just wondering if you looked at the videos that had the strong completion rates and correlated that back to the audio.
I mean, that's definitely something we're considering. Do you mean like the lower the audio, the less the completion rate?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like we typically see stronger video completion rates, audio picks up a bit. Still low overall though.
Right. I mean, that's something to look into for sure. It makes a lot of sense. I think I'm still just getting over the shock that no one's listening to audio at all. But yeah.
Let's actually, I want to extend Alyssa's point to everybody and ask if others of you can confirm the kinds of metrics that she was seeing. Are we seeing that low a use of audio generally? Nods. Anybody want to speak to it?
There's one thing. Maybe you'll find it interesting, I don't know. But I had seen a study which I thought was fascinating. It was more on the linear side, but I would have to believe it's true. Because we all live in such a world of multitasking, if you don't get the audio has to be super compelling or for the first like 5 seconds, or no one's even going to look up. So I think that's something to sort of, we would just, sorry, I'm outing you guys too, but we were just like, because your presentation was great, and we were just talking about how silos still exist, and it's a miss because they need to certainly work together. I think the flip is probably true on the digital video side, because if the visual isn't compelling, you may never turn the sound on. So right. I don't know how you marry the two. But the audio, I don't know that audio is dead. And then there's some research that I've seen recently that radio is on the rise. So
it would be interesting to oh yeah, go ahead.
I want to add to. I'm in your field. I'm similar. I'm a producer, and I think a lot of it has to do on the audio side with the placement, and especially what the platforms are allowing now, because yeah, if it's something in stream, then people aren't turning their audio on, but you know, now you can do in video too. And if you're in a platform where videos or where audio is already on, then it works there. So I do think you have to then customize your final executions to align with the placement, which is really important. But we have found a lot of success with audio based on the placement, and I agree, radio. We're in Southern California, though. Radio has continued to be on the rise. Like, radio's not dead. Podcasting is hot. So there's a lot still that we've found successes with audio. Now, something like Facebook where people are in stream, yeah, the completion rate is entirely different, we've seen.
unless the visuals are super compelling.
Yes. And that's where budget comes in.
The visual will prompt the audio?
Yeah, and also, you notice now that...
Yeah, use this.
I don't need that, do I? You notice now that there's a lot of subtitles, right?
Yeah.
That try to bring you in, so they're sort of covering all bases.
It'll be interesting as we see, especially in OTT, as we see a lot of these formats migrate into digital driven TV, how much of our online digital habits will also migrate, and we'll start interacting with the big screen in ways that are so familiar with handhelds and with desktop. I mean, I'm already in the habit of hitting the mute button a lot more than I ever did years ago with TV, and part of it is migrating some of my own digital habits into the big screen as they start feeling as a consumer like they're merging. So.
I feel like you rewind because
yeah.
My head's now on my mobile device, and I look up and I go, shit, I missed like half of that. I gotta go back. What happened on this is us?
Or rewinding radio.
That's right.
Live radio. I'm like, oh, back. Oh, shoot. I can't go back. Yeah.
Right. A lot of us are listening to podcasts in background now, and we're missing half of it, and suddenly something pops, and you realize you just missed something. And that set of habits becomes a series of expectations that we're now bringing into video. Yeah. Anything else? Any other questions?
Was your media directed to different groups in your second case study? Because the pregnancy one, which was the one that did the best, was it? Did you have different targets for the different messages, or?
I believe so. I can get back to you on that. I'm not totally sure exactly who we targeted, but we did choose the pregnancy as a concept in and of its own self, because the other two were just kind of general. But we did a lot of research that our paid search, I don't know this language, but all the keywords or whatever, people were searching for pregnancy and looking for information about pregnancy. So we thought it was enough out there that it was worth making an entire concept about that. So I'm not 100% sure if we targeted, pregnant ladies, but I could look into that for sure.
So it could be that the message was more effective because it was targeted to a specific subgroup versus the others.
Absolutely.
But, I mean, you could hear the reaction in the room to that last one was sort of confirmed what its creative power.
Right.
Is that it was striking a level of familiarity, especially with women, that none of these others would have.
And hopefully it would trigger, well, look at all this stuff. It's not covered for pregnancy.
Right.
Maybe I should look into this for me, too, even if it doesn't apply.
Alyssa, thank you very much.
Thank you so
That was
much.
so much fun. Thank you. So let me ask Nina and our panel to come up. For those of you who haven't met Nina Lentini yet, she is our senior editor of event content here at Media Post. Was a longtime editor of our Media Daily, which many of you have probably been reading for years, Marketing Daily site, and is a longtime B2B journalist within the marketing and the media field. She recently joined our team to start taking a lot of the content that we've been generating from these events and turning them into reusable content, case studies, reporting, blog reporting. A lot of the reporting off of the events that you read are coming from Nina. She's going to be leading our final panel that they promised me are really going to drill into this marriage of media and creative, what's really going on in agencies now, how they really are coming together and what they're producing. Please welcome Nina in our last panel.
Thank you. This is on, right? Okay. Speaking of marriage, today's my 31st wedding anniversary.
Happy anniversary.
Creatively, my husband and I got divorced and in 2002 after 14 years, but then we got back together and got married again. So, little known fact about me. Anyway, Steve likes to talk about how old he is, but I got him beat there. I could be his sister. Anyway, older sister. And I go back to Adweek. I worked at Adweek in the 80s. And I remember so much creativity at that time with Apple's 1984 ad and all the stuff that came out of Madison Avenue in those days. I also remember that nobody cared about media. I mean, there wasn't much media to care about, right? I mean, so it's, flipped to 30 years later, and it's absolutely equal. Media is absolutely as important, if not more so, than creative these days. And these guys are here to tell us how that works for them as co-equals. I'm going to let them introduce themselves, and we'll take it from there. How's that?
Sounds good.
Okay. Mike.
Hi, I'm Michael Anderson. I'm the Vice President of Media at Empower Media Marketing in Cincinnati, Ohio.
Hi, I'm James. I'm at M6. We're a media agency backed by Group M.
Hi, I'm Dawn Webley. I'm actually with OH Partners. We're actually located here, Phoenix, Arizona. So, VP of Media and Analytics.
I'm Jeff Zanella. I'm the Creative Media Director at Trillium Media and Hill Holiday. I basically sit at the intersection between our creative teams and our media teams. So, the answer to the panel is kind of my job. Yeah.
No pressure.
No pressure.
So, Dawn is the hometown girl here, and I thought you might start off with your 10 years of history meshing creative and media. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's been wild. Phoenix has been a growing advertising market. 10 years ago, nobody knew Phoenix, really. I mean, we didn't really have any big agencies coming out of here, and today we do. We recently became the largest agency in Phoenix, so it's really exciting, spanning across local and national, all the way to international, and I think that really comes from that tie-in and what we can do. Our first large client that really changed things for us was the Arizona Lottery. And taking in what we wanted to do and how we wanted to change it, they had been very, very linear. Primarily, probably 80% of their dollars previously was always spent in television. And they got a new group, we came in, and so we kind of changed things. We had a big campaign that launched Windfall Willie. Most people here aren't going to know who that is. But Windfall Willie used to be associated with the pick. He was only associated with one game. And we brought him to life, like Flow and all that kind of fun stuff. So Windfall Willie is a real person, and we launched him in 2016 back into the market, and it was a huge ask between social and linear and digital, and how we did that and how we brought him to life. And then the battle between creative and media with, I want to run a 60 and that's all I want to run. Well, that's so not going to work. You know, how we launched the 60 into the market, how we launched a 30, how it was launched on TV versus OTT, and then how we engaged on social. We actually did an experiential campaign with pickaxes throughout the valley, with a social campaign where people had to go find them and engage with it. We had an 1,100% ROI on that campaign, with people actually engaging and posting on behalf of that, and it was wild. The campaign was a multi-million-dollar campaign launching him in, and it was extremely successful.
What do you think about that, Michael?
Well, I mean, ROI at 1,100% is pretty impressive. I think any client would take that.
Well, you have a couple of clients that have won or were finalists in the MediaPost Creative Awards?
Yeah, I think, and that was, I think, a little bit more they won awards because of creative use of media. Mm-hmm. And certainly, I think all of us in this room try to get as creative as we can with how we apply media, and especially in the recent years as media's evolved to become what it is today. That's been very important. Where we've shifted at Empower is we were a 35-year-old media independent agency. And so we've always been about spots and dots for the last, 30 years, if you will. And as of about 6 months ago, we hired some new leadership into the company and made the decision that we want to be more of the agency of the future. And not just a media agency who partners with other creative agencies on their client's business. And again, everyone's still in separate buildings and trying to play nice in the sandbox. So what we're trying to do is get media experts and creative experts to work together at the company within the same business unit. So we've hired a creative director who is now building his team at the agency. And the goal is on every account, there is a media expert and a creative expert who will collaborate and work together to use the data and the insights now that are available to all of us and develop richer, more in-depth creative that we think is going to resonate with the consumer. And again, get them to either turn on their audio because we've got all those insights in terms of how we're launching that media, but again, making sure that we're making the most use of media and creative working together.
Jump in here.
No, I mean, I think it's really interesting, and I think on our I shouldn't reference the prep call for these things, but we have a prep call before every panel, and it's funny because and Jeff mentioned it then. He said on the prep call, Jeff said, "This is my job. This is my role. This is what I do." And I said, actually, this is crazy because this is what we do, and we've. We at M6 were backed by Group M, but we were born out of a creative agency. And I used to work at the creative agency, and I grew up in a creative agency. And it's really interesting to be able to kind of come across from creative to media and kind of, bring that whole concept of comms planning, because the whole concept of comms planning is grounded in, bringing together, what do we know about our audience, and we can talk about data maybe later, but what do we know about our audience? How do we bring that together with what we're saying to the audience and where we're reaching them essentially? And it really does need to be unified.
Yeah, and it's like it's not what we do; it's like what we have to do now. In the context of we've heard it throughout the entire 3 days we've been here, is that we're in a war for consumer attention right now. Like, consumers are in control of everything that they do and everything that they see, and they know that they hate ads, and it's something that they just don't want to choose to engage with unless it's super relevant or it's contextually meaningful to them or it's interesting and it aligns or adds value to their everyday life. So that's what we do, in terms of the job, and it's not just media trying to solve for this, it's not just creative on the other side, it's not just siloed thinking that's going to actually solve for this, it's the groups, and it's a team sport working together to help generate ideas, leveraging data and insights and consumer understanding to actually create something that is going to break through and resonate with consumers. And an idea can come from anywhere, but it's the idea that creative teams and media teams and analytics teams sitting together in a room together, collaborating, as well as with our media publishers and our partners to kind of conceive of these things that at the end of the day that are pushing the boundaries on innovation or ways for which and how we can ensure the fact that when we're talking to consumers, they're leaning in and they're opting in to consume what we have to say in order to communicate our brand's value propositions or understand what the product messaging is and understanding at the end of the day what we're trying to ultimately get them to buy.
Yeah, that's so true. I think obviously the entire industry has been turned upside down in the last 10 years or even the last 5 years, whatever you want to call it in terms of timing, but it has changed. And creative, I think, is no longer about taking 6 months to develop the beautiful, sexy 30-second commercial that's going to win all of these awards. Creative now has to, instead of that being the goal should be speed to market. Or, creative needs to operate, I think, at the speed of media. We now are developing campaigns that can go reach consumers instantly based on their behaviors or their interests or things that are going to be very relevant to them. Well, we need creative that's going to go along at that same point. And I can't just have one online video that I'm going to purpose for all of my plans. It's working with those people, collaborating up front to say, knowing that this is what the goal is for the campaign, and again, timing the market or speed to get in front of that consumer with the right message at the right time is so important. The creative has to evolve to become more,
I like that, creative at the speed of
media. Yeah, that's what we talk to our clients about.
Yeah, that's really great.
No, it's really interesting, and I mentioned before that we've had this model which we call the AND model, which is media and creative coming together, and it seems like such a long time ago now, but in 2015, when we made Lexus Hoverboard, that campaign was literally like real time. We were creating content overnight, like a lot of the time, but the narrative evolved with the story. We were monitoring what people were saying about we teased it, then we kind of showed the hoverboard, and then et cetera, but that narrative, we had an idea of the phases, but we actually we didn't know what content we were going to be launching. We had some kind of level of idea, and then obviously we were creating the content based on, and we were actually answering questions that people were asking in social channels. Is it real? Was one of the biggest ones at the start, and we were able to kind of show that and build that narrative, and the story went over essentially nearly 3 months. And it's just such a good learning from my perspective. But that was like 4 years ago now. It's crazy.
Yeah, I think it's wild. You have conversations today with your creative team that you never had before. Yeah. They wanted an award, and we've had those conversations where I'm like, I know you produced that, but it actually never went on air, so you can't submit it. There's always that conversation. And the importance of media. It took creative a really long time to realize that without media, none of their stuff gets seen. It's really an interesting concept.
Distribution is key.
Yeah, without us actually planning for these things, or the conversation of, I want to make a TV spot and that's not what we should be doing, or we can't afford that, is another fun conversation. And then when it doesn't run and they get upset with you and you say, well, I told you so. So you don't have to have those conversations as much anymore because you're having those conversations at the front end of the conversation. You are figuring out those goals, you're figuring out those KPIs, and you have different KPIs for each vertical that you're going into.
Are you running a potato sack race? Is that what you say?
Yeah, that's what it, basically, that's exactly, you have to, with your creative person, you have to be running a potato sack race. You got to be in the same bag, running down to the finish line. Without each other, you're not going to make it there. They drive each other.
Yeah, I think that's important. I think CMOs and CFOs traditionally have gone to market again with a sexy 30-second commercial, a print ad, and maybe something else in digital or radio. And now they're freaking out because, oh my God, I've got to come up with dynamic messaging. So you're telling me I'm going to have to develop 57 new forms of creative? There's no way we could afford that. And I think that's where it's key, where media and creative work together and say, no, you don't need 57. We're going to come with you with the right recommendation based on the segmentation that we've been doing and the data that we've been analyzing to say these are the right, richest segments that can help move your business, and therefore, let's make sure we're speaking to these people.
I think that's super interesting, but also there's the whole kind of concept now of AI-driven or, and dynamic creative, programmatic creative, et cetera, and it used to be a really dirty word, and we've all seen those horrible, programmatic, creative executions, particularly in display advertising, which is like, what is this? This is the ugliest thing I've ever seen. But actually, done right and done with the right guardrails, it can really work. And we're doing that for 2 or 3 clients now, and it's really paying dividends. Using a whole load of different signals. It's not. Everything from kind of environmental stuff, so say weather, all the way through to obviously, the behavioral and, demographic information that we know about the people we're serving the content to.
And we have to fundamentally change the way we work, between how the agency is even structured and how we interact with the clients to respond in that sort of rapid moment. One of the things we've done specifically for our retail clients, which retail, it's an hour-by-hour game, is to create an activation team where it's literally a creative person as a programmatic lead and a data scientist sitting in a room together, rapidly responding to what they're seeing in the market, what's trending in social media or within just culture in general, and then producing content at that time, getting it to our legal team for rapid approvals, and getting that into market within a few hours.
Yeah, we recently had a campaign launch on behalf of a CPG account last year, and we immediately started looking at the analytics to kind of see what was going on. We launched different media in one market versus the other. We were doing a test campaign, and we weren't seeing traffic driving from Phoenix actually to our website, and so it threw up literally within hours it threw up red alarms, and we realized that the creative team had put the client URL on the creative and not our campaign URL on the creative. And that's a problem when our KPI is our campaign URL and what we're driving to that website. So but we were able, it was funny, I was actually in an executive meeting, and so I was literally I need you out here now. And but we were able to turn it on and fix it so rapid. And that's one of the things we've done as being an independent agency and having everything full service in-house is it's rapid response. It's, rapid results can be catchy, but it's rapid response and how quickly can you respond.
And that's so important. Brands now need to be relevant to consumers. I mean, that's all any brand manager is going to come to you now and say is, how can I be relevant? This consumer has so many choices. How is my brand going to be relevant and stand out to her? In days where, she's just scrolling through a screen, how do we stop the thumb? And that's what's important is you've really got to be on the pulse of society and things that are happening in the market or just in society right now, because you want to be able to respond to them and act quickly to be relevant. And absolutely, prior to being at the agency, I spent about 10 years on the client side, and this is when social was exploding. And we had too many processes and agencies in place and legal, but we couldn't respond or develop creative that would be timely and relevant to causes and things that were going on in society. And that hurt us as a brand because we saw all of our competitors certainly going there.
I think Jeff put it well in the call when he said that the deer have the guns now.
Yeah, they're in control, and that's the battle we're fighting. And yeah, relevancy is critical. And being meaningful, and the context is obviously critical in that context. But then the formats, obviously we have so many different formats, but it's not just putting them on a spec sheet, sending them to the creative team, and they just repurpose video for that sort of, that aspect ratio. But when we first introduced, and started doing vertical video, it wasn't just turning the camera. You really had to think about, obviously if it's Snapchat, then you have to have the content look more organic and less polished because it would look similar to what's natively already there on the platform in general. And also too, if we're doing some sort of set piece, we had to redesign our sets. So if it was a kitchen, you had to elongate all the cabinets to kind of fill up the frame. Otherwise, everything just looked squished and just didn't look right. So
and I think it goes the other way around too with us as media planners and buyers. We, based on a creative campaign, we may pivot on what we're doing for media based on how people need to engage with that particular creative. And we've had a lot of those conversations in-house lately with our creative team of, okay, well, now that we're doing now that I know what the campaign's actually gonna be, I actually think we should shift things a little bit because the consumer isn't gonna engage with this media placement the same way they would previously. And so, and being able to have those conversations and have them in a timely manner before the campaign is over versus after the campaign is over is really important. And that goes back to analytics and being able to have access and transparency to what's going on right now. know.
Yeah, test, learn, and iterate. I mean, from a creative perspective, all that data and insights in terms of what's performing, is it certain elements, is it the music bed, is it the track, is it this visual, is it this color scheme, all those little nuances just help enhance the creative product at the end of the day as we go forward.
I think that's absolutely the case, and just going back to that and what you were saying a minute ago, we were running kind of some live creative for a retail client a couple of months ago, and we had the right people in the room, and by the right people I mean we had an analyst in the room, we had creatives in the room, and we had media people in the room. And at the end of the run, at the end of when we'd kind of finished, Natasha, one of our creative directors, came to me and she was like, "This is like such a breath of fresh air, James. This is amazing." She's like, "We are creating stuff that's based on what's real, actual real, data, what people are actually doing, rather than just something that someone thought up."
Or just wanted to do.
Right.
Exactly, yeah.
And that's where we see the benefit now in this new industry, is just the data and information that's available. I think that's what excites the people that work in our creative team. Is I used to just get a brief, and now I get brief, but I also get so many more insights and strategy and analytics from just a background or briefing perspective that just helps make everything better.
Yeah, it really does, and I think just taking a step back, and apologies, it's just something that I think is kind of super interesting here is just the kind of status and where we are as an industry. It's some people are scared, and maybe rightly, but I think it's super exciting. We've come from this place where media used to be just an add-on to a creative agency. So BBDO in the 1960s, you'd have a couple of media guys who sat in the basement or wherever they used to sit, and the creative would be produced, and then the media would be negotiated by, over the phone by those media people. And to think about there's a whole argument right now been bubbling for years about gross versus net, in terms of, media billings. And, it used to be that the creative agency was paid for out of the media billings, that 15% paid for the creative agency, and the two things were inextricably linked. Then we had this kind of big divorce of creative and media, 1980s, I guess early 90s, and then what happened was media became this practice. It became something that was, no longer to be hidden in the basement. It became a real a science. It was an art, and it became a force. It was a force, and it was
a race to get in front of the deck.
Exactly. Yeah, and then the other thing that happened during that time is that then we had fragmentation, and since remember, cable TVs only came around in sort of late 70s, 80s. You had fragmentation of TV. Then you had digital. So all of that then made the practice of media so much bigger, and media planners started to be proud of what they do, which was never the case before. But then also what happened was then you had this kind of situation where media was still, it was a practice, but it was divorced from the creative, and you had that situation, I think it was mentioned a few minutes ago, where the art of the 30-second TV ad was perfected, and then the TV ad was handed over from the creative agency to the media agency, and that was it, with not a thought of where it would go. And we're seeing now that has to change, and indeed is changing.
Well, and that it takes time. It does. We can pivot and we can make quick decisions, but at the end of the day, media planning and what we do, it doesn't just happen overnight, and it is a really important, a skill to have. And it's a unique skill to have. Not everybody can do it. Not everybody can understand it. And, we should be paid for it. Just throwing that out there. So it's one of those crazy things, and you have those conversations with creative. And I'm sure we've all had the battle of creative wanting to take money out of our budget to move it into creative, and having those conversations of the reality. I just recently had a campaign. We've got 3 national brands, and the budget to the creative budget to media ratio is like right on for a couple of them, and like way off for another, actually in media's favor. And to be honest with you, it wasn't my job to catch it in the beginning, and I'm catching it after and having conversations with our creative services people. But it's kind of one of those things where it's like, that should be paid attention to, because we should have been recommending in the very beginning to actually move money out of media in order to support the creative that we needed. And so it's understanding that we're actually on the same team. And I think that's really what it is. I don't mind giving creative the necessary budget as long as I can still fulfill what I need to do. And I would hope that creative doesn't really like to do that. I'm just going to throw that out there. But you know, they always want every last penny they can get. But it makes sense in certain instances for why they want those budgets or need those budgets with content the way it is, and how they need to cut things down, and to the point earlier of the voiceovers and what you're paying for national accounts to actually get that out there.
Well, because consumers don't care. They don't differentiate too. They don't understand what a media idea is or where media and creative. And those lines are blurred right now too. That intersection.
It's magic.
It just and also too, like the way you know, because it comes down to like also too, like, you know, like these are things and these are ideas that can live in the context of beyond just, you know, if it's a valuable service that we're providing to consumers in a way that adds value in their daily life. You know, we had a coffee brand where it's all about convenience. It's all about getting to work, you know, caffeinated and energized. You know, and one of the popular platforms that we were using in order to obviously engage consumers on a regular basis on their way to work was Waze. And, you know, we were able to think about, well, we can go beyond just this idea of just telling people and showing ads and showing pins, but how can we build something into the platform that truly helps people get their coffee quicker and faster? So we worked with the Waze team to integrate the mobile ordering and on-the-go ordering into the actual platform. So seamlessly and frictionlessly, you can navigate to work and just click, I'm going to work, and then I want my coffee and my go-to order. Click that, and all I had to do was drive to the drive-thru and get to work. So was that a media idea? Was that a creative idea? It doesn't matter. It was something that the consumers just loved, and at the end of the day, it moved product for our client.
And it's something that I always say. You know, we in our industry, you know, think we look in, and you know, we think we sometimes overthink things. But you know, the way that the consumer perceives a brand, you know, is completely kind of agnostic of that in a lot of ways. The consumer perceives the brand, not the channel necessarily that they saw it in. I'm not saying the channels are irrelevant or the creative's irrelevant, but you know, that you've got to sometimes kind of take that step back and kind of really think.
Well, and the consumer doesn't know where they're getting their media.
Exactly.
They have no idea. I mean, we the same campaign that I was talking about earlier last year, we did a pre-test for that same client. They had never advertised before. And we actually put a survey into the market, and I told our strategist who was putting the questionnaire together, please put on there what media, where have they heard about this client before? And 7% responded back with different media channels: television, radio, Facebook, and none of the above had. I mean, Facebook content, so sure. They don't know they don't know how they're being targeted. They don't realize organic versus paid. But they had absolutely no idea as a consumer.
You know, you guys, we could go on forever here. I
God.
can tell. I mean, they have so many stories.
It's
but
the Wild West.
I think we're going to have to take some questions from the audience, because I'm sure they're dying to ask.
I'm going to take the MC's prerogative and ask the first question here because I'm really curious if you guys could bring us into that room or the potato sack. About how data and creative are effectively talking with one another. So the creatives that you remember who wanted the grand 30 and 60, so that they can better adopt and appreciate what data has to offer them, or get jazzed on what I think, Jeff, you were describing as almost like an improv session that could almost jazz a creative into the ways in which they're responding to the audience in near real time. Could you take us into that room a little bit to talk about what you're learning about how data and creative can talk together effectively?
Yeah, I think there's so many different ways, especially when you look at segmentation now and just all the data available in terms of just audiences and the type of people you want to reach, and then what message obviously is relevant for that. But I think even some of the data that we've looked at recently to help our creatives understand is just use of media vehicles. So, you know, helping them understand the amount of people now who are skipping ads or not necessarily listening to ads in a TV campaign, or helping them understand where, I guess, the biggest value is going to come from, you know, the creative that they're putting together in a campaign. Consumer usage data, the habits and practices of a consumer now, and how that's fundamentally changed so dramatically over the last few years. We now have data, you know, that helps us inform how the consumer is spending their days and where they want to be messaged to. And so I think as just a kind of a preset or kind of setting the table in some of those meetings, it's helpful just to understand new data and information that's available on the consumer and how they're spending their time given the proliferation of options now that are available to them throughout their day. So now something like Waze advertising might be data that we want to make sure we take a look at as we're developing insights for a campaign.
Yeah, we did this one time with, data everywhere, but from a breakdown of the anatomy of a video consumption, where we can look at all the videos and look to where people were staying engaged and where they were falling off. And we go back to our creative team and say, there's this inflection point where people are just dropping out this video, they're stopping watching and they're moving on. So what do we need to change and tweak as part of that to get them through to full completion? Or we can hook into other technology companies and measurement like brain sites where we can actually see the actual brain pattern movements and how we're stimulating people's mind to, if they're if we're actually stimulating them in a pleasurable way, the creative teams, we can just say wow, this is something that obviously is working from that perspective or it's not working. So we'll go down there and actually dissect it. It's a coach breaking down a football game and really looking through it all to help us inform as we go forward. Or if it's in our retail client or activation team, it's rapid response in terms of the data that we're seeing coming in right in that moment and having them physically sit next to each other in a room that they don't leave for 8 to 10 hours a day.
Telling a creative like telling a comedian who doesn't get a laugh is letting them see where people aren't paying attention to them anymore. Has a lot of traction for them, right? I think it does for us journalists too. When we started seeing the data, the hard data around how many people were reading our articles, what was popping and not, even though all of us resisted that idea for years as journalists, we know what we're supposed to be reporting on. But when we actually start seeing the data and seeing audiences ebb and flow, we get connected to that in a way that we didn't expect.
The idea of ego and just checking that at the door and just saying, listen, this is valuable insights. It's only going to make me better and do my job better. So once we kind of broke that down and kind of got over that sort of aversion to it, it was eye-opening. And we just became part of our standard practice.
That's exactly it. You asked, can we go inside the room, I think. And it's an interesting point because for us, there is a room. It is a physical space. We have built it. We have created it. It's a little bit Minority Report. There's a lot of screens. But we do actually have data, on screens, live real-time data. And the creatives are, engaging with that and ingesting that, along, working together with an analyst. And it's an interesting point because, you kind of, to some extent do need to kind of, think about the physical space, and how, these very disparate disciplines, an analyst and a creative are very different people. How do you best, get these people and ask them to interact? And it is the physical space as much as the people in the room.
And it's so important now, too, as we're getting into much more of a personalized or one-to-one marketing world. Things like CRM are becoming very important again, and email marketing. So if I'm in a room and trying to plan out a campaign or a business, and I'm trying to see, okay, what is my opportunity from a prospecting to retention, process, if you will, if I'm trying to move a consumer through the purchase funnel, okay, well, what messaging is going to be most relevant to get people from being prospects to now being interested in my brands and ultimately buying? So that information is very important to make sure that you're developing the right messaging to engage with the right pool of consumers, based on where you are in that purchase funnel. I may really need, important drivers that are going to convert people from interest or from a prospect more into an interest, and the creative message is going to be very important in that because we know we're going to deliver it to the right people, but it's really got to make sure it's on point and accurate with what we're trying to accomplish.
We've done a lot of that too, honing in on the consumer journey and bringing in creative at the very beginning, and that is the room. Right, like that is where you need to be in order for all of that to actually for that to actually come together, because if they don't understand at what point we're buying a certain tactic and for what part of the purchase funnel, that creative messaging is very likely going to be off.
So you guys shut me up because I have 10 questions. So make me shut up.
Hi, talking about having all of the right people in the room, there was one person that seemed to be missing for me, and I would love to get your perspective on whether you've tried it or not, and that's the client.
We don't want them in. Wait a minute.
They're there or they're on the phone. I mean, they're not too far away. But do you want to see the sausages?
Let's not get crazy.
Now, maybe not suggesting the CMO or the one that's the ultimate decision maker, but maybe somebody from their content or editorial team, should they have them?
Yeah, and we do that for with a number of our clients. You know, so for one of our insurance provider clients during an enrollment time frame, you know, it's a very, very short time frame. It's very performance driven, and we do build a war room with which the client is there. And similarly for a retail client in Europe, we try and beat Amazon every year. And you know, for that Black Friday moment, and obviously Black Friday is a thing in Europe now, not that it used to be. But you know, we do have that war room, and the client is obviously an integral part of that.
Yeah, it's imperative. I think you have someone from the client or brand involved throughout the entire process, and certainly up front where there's that exploration for inspiration and again, understanding what's important to the brand. Maybe it's not the CMO, but certainly it's a brand manager, an associate brand manager, or someone who's involved from a communication standpoint. It's critical that we all collaborate up front so we understand the opportunity and the challenges that kind of lie ahead. And then I think it's imperative that we go off and go to our own room and then obviously collaborate and come up with ideas that are going to help solve that challenge. But certainly you want to involve them throughout that process. Whether it's okay, we have a good idea here. Let's stop. Let's make sure we have a call to bring the client in. But as you know, when you're in different physical locations, it's not always easy to have them in the room, but you have to involve them as much as possible so you don't have that surprise factor.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to add to that, just very briefly, it's having the right people from the client in the room. So for the Black Friday example that I mentioned before, we alter prices in real time. So you have to have someone who has the decision-making power in the room to say, we're going to drop, an Amazon Echo is the worst example here, but a certain product like a tablet, we can drop that by $5 or whatever, to compete.
We actually have a couple clients that actually initiate the creative brief. So they are in it from the get-go, which can kind of be sometimes a pain. But they are always a part of it from the get-go. But that's not all clients. That's only some clients.
So, Jeff, you started off by making a point that we're at war for the consumer's attention. It almost sounds like you're at war with the consumer for his attention. And this, forgive me for sounding like a cross between Marshall McLuhan and Baba Ramdas here, but it seems like the harder we push on the consumer, much like teenagers in our homes, the harder they push back.
Oh, totally. I mean, and we're also consumers first. I mean, taking it from that perspective, in terms of our job, I want to be at a dinner party and be like, oh, I'm the guy who puts 30-second ads in front of your YouTube content. I want to be doing something that's obviously bringing some sort of value to you in your everyday life. And that's the kind of way we look at it, is that is this going to be something that provides some sort of value exchange for that consumer? And if that's the case, I think one way we looked at it is there's two types of impressions. There's incidental impressions, the idea that there's the idea of just spots and dots and getting those in front of consumers and obviously optimizing those so they're as relevant as possible. And they're as meaningful as possibly can. But the idea is if we get to a choice-based impression where it's an experience that the consumer is opting in as a result of something that is actually something that resonates with them or it's valuable for them in the context of the Waze example, where that's where we got them. And at the end of the day, they're going to spend time with us, they're going to hear what we have to say, and we're going to be able to communicate through that experience what we're trying to communicate from a brand perspective.
Yeah, and that's a whole rabbit hole that I guess we don't have time to go down, but I would love to. But it's that whole kind of concept of a value exchange, and it's incredibly important. And what bringing creative and media together with underpinned by data allows us to do is to understand what represents a value exchange for the audience, and that's going to be different for you. It's going to be different for you. It's going to be different for me, and that's why we absolutely it's so imperative and so important.
Hi, so me again. First of all, I want to put in for being on this panel next year because I have a lot of passion around this subject. Most of my career was spent on the agency side. I started doing comms planning on the Unilever business in 2000. They said they created it. Procter said they created it. You can talk about it later. But one of the things that I experienced over the years, especially on the agency side, was that you needed, to the point the lady was making earlier, somebody, a decision maker, a key decision maker in the middle that is the client, because ultimately they own the output and they're responsible for delivering the sales. And they had to create one agenda. Like I remember working on the Dove stuff years ago, and basically the category head got up and said, it's about what's right for the business, and anybody that doesn't contribute with that filter is out. And people were called out. So you had all of these competing agencies that were doing what was right for Dove, and you saw what happened, what the outcomes were. So it could be magical to the points you were making, so I just wanted to say that. Were you going to comment? Because I have one question for you guys, which ad blocking. So I talked about that a little bit yesterday. I think that we can, to the point you made about being at war with the consumer, I think the consumer has more choices than ever, that's obvious. That's going to continue to grow. And how we can do a great comms plan, and we can look at the customer journey. It could be informed by data, but right now that's just digital data too. It's not necessarily offline behavior for them. That's still third-party surveys. How do we create messaging and engagements that consumers want to engage with? And what's the learning there? Are you guys battling that, or are you too busy in the day-to-day to really sort of take some time aside and...
Yes. I can speak to that a tiny bit. I mean, we bake it into our process. The first assumption within our when we've just launched a new planning process across the agency, and the first assumption is that the power is in the hands of the consumer. That's how we approach everything. But that underlines, you say ad blocking, that primarily affects these days display advertising, but obviously, I think comment was made yesterday, people have been ad blocking for years by going to the kitchen during I thought it was, yeah. I thought it was, yeah.
Someone really smart said that.
Someone incredibly smart. But and consumers have been opting out of ads for a long time, and it just underlines that point of the value exchange. I think your Waze example is great because it's an example of it's something that it helps users, it makes their lives better. A really good example that I always like to quote is and it's not even that new, it's 4 or 5 years ago, is when Post-it notes used display advertising and remessaging to follow people around with their reminders. Like, it's kind of a really cool way of using remessaging, and I wish I'd thought of that.
Yeah, I was jealous of that one too.
Yeah, I think it comes back to relevancy. And again, we can't just, shotgun a message out to the entire world and assume that everyone's going to accept it, view it, and then act on it. So I think it's much more important, again, to use data to start to understand your consumers and where you have that opportunity to reach out to people who are going to truly engage with that message, knowing that they're an advocate of the brand or interested in the category. That's going to become, I think, an aid that'll help us get through opportunities or situations like ad blocking. But I also think in terms of media and creative working together, that's where brands have the opportunity to divert themselves, if you will, from that sea of sameness, if you will. So a lot of us play in categories where every single ad looks exactly the same based on all the other competitors in the category, and everyone's got that similar share. Well, I think how you can be more relevant to a consumer is you can zig where they zag, and again, develop creative that is truly going to be unique for that category or that space, and hopefully, grab their attention.
We actually lived in that with an account, a CPG account last September, where they are in the sea of sameness, and logos look exactly the same, and they don't have a huge share here in the U.S. And so we had to kind of figure out what we were going to do. We had 2 creative campaigns. The CEO of the company really liked one campaign that, yes, we built it, but we were really concerned with the targeting, that it wasn't going to actually do what they wanted it to do. And so we built in a survey to put out to creative test before the campaign went live. And we actually creative tested 5 days before it went live and convinced and proved with data showed the CEO why we needed to make a shift in the creative campaign and why that was the right one to go with. And she was floored by the response of the creative campaign that she wasn't that thrilled about, but she wasn't our target at that point. And again, we talked about that yesterday too, in one of our roundtables of the client thinking that they're the target, that they need to see the creative, that they need to be served the ads, and 9 times out of 10, they're not our target.
We're going to have to wrap this up, I can see.
We do, but guys, you made good on the promise. Thank you so much. So we get to do this next time. Thank you very much, guys. We're going to have that's going to be a good roundtable. So we're going to wrap by drilling in deeper on something that we've been mentioning along the way, because for this summit, as we often do at the TV and Video Summit, we have a number of people from the political agencies who have been, in many ways, have been at the advance guard of a lot of advanced TV and a lot of data-driven digital. We have had Ryan here from Targeted Victory. We had Rob from Brabender Cox, who is Sharon's husband, and we had Ben from National Media. We've had on this stage representatives of most of all the major parties, the major campaigns over the last 6-7 years, because some of the most interesting work that's going on in advanced TV and data-driven video is really happening in the political sphere. Translating that into lessons that other types of agencies and brands can use is challenging. Sharon Loparejo is the media director at Brabender Cox, one of the largest agencies in DC, overseeing especially Republican side campaigns, has been working especially in OTT. And she's here to report on what was learned in the last cycle, where obviously we saw massive amounts of investment, but a lot of that money starting to move into the OTT channel. Few segments saw more of this channel than politics, and she's here to report on what she found and what we might be able to learn from it. Please welcome Sharon.
Thank you. Thank you. I know we're eager to get through this, and I'm eager to get started, and so I thought I'd just get right into it. The way we like to in politics, with a question. So I'm very curious, how many of you watch ad-supported OTT on a regular basis? Okay. And how many of you saw a political ad from this fall? Okay, so for many of us who didn't, I'm going to catch you up on what we were doing. So to set the stage, back 10, 15 years ago, political budgets were determined by the biggest ego in the room. They would say, well, you're just going to spend 60% on broadcast and 30% on digital and 10% on mail. And that's kind of just the way it was done. We had to make ads, turn them around sometimes from development to on the air in 8 to 10 hours. We were trying to get 1,000 gross rating points a week, sometimes 2 or 3 behind messages, trying to keep up with our opponents. And like you know, we were advertising based on geography and demographics, and it was pretty much 30-second spots. So fast forward to now. Instead of the biggest ego in the room, it's usually data. Data's become king. It tells us how to advertise, where to advertise, how to set our budgets. We still have to move really quickly, 8 to 10 hours, turning around spots, but instead of just 30, we're doing 6, 15, 30-minute. And it's to different audiences, too. So data's made things more simple, but also more complicated. Also, we are targeting individuals instead of just geographically. And so that kind of brings me into OTT and why in political we love it. Because we do get to reach the audience in a very specific way. And we get, of course, we all know this, to reach an audience that's no longer on linear, and it has the cable subscriptions. And we also can offer more frequency to high value targets. So I wanted to start up with a case study from this last cycle. This was a statewide race for governor. We had been up on OTT just targeting cordless segments, and we had been in the primary runoff, this is general election, and we were underperforming. Polling was telling us we were underperforming with independents, especially independent women. So we bought more impressions toward them. We got with a subscriber that had a large independent women base. And this is the ad we showed.
Dad says state government's a mess. He says our room is a mess too. I just cleaned it.
He wants to get Oklahoma's financial house in order.
Get the economy picking up.
And get rid of government waste.
Invest in our schools and our teachers.
Please give our dad the job of fixing Oklahoma.
Maybe he'll stop giving us jobs like these.
Doubt it.
Oklahoma's crown starts right here.
Now.
Okay, so that was successful. We did see an increase in that segment. So it was a good use of OTT, I think. Another reason we love it. How many kids did he have? 6.
That's like a pressing question.
Yeah. Right, yes, they were very busy. Yes, that was it. You got to see them all. So it also answers the efficiency problem. And this is for congressional races. This is a big thing. For those of you that don't know, a congressional district has about 700,000 people. So to advertise in a DMA, especially an expensive one like New York, just makes no sense. So we have a client that we've worked for years that's in the New York DMA, and this year we were able to do OTT, get on some broadcast channels for them in the New York DMA. And so that was a fun use. We did a whole bunch of different segments and different advertising. I could go into it, but in the essence of time here, we'll just move on. This is something that everybody's been talking about. It's been breaking down the walls between traditional and digital. And I think OTT is such an exciting space to be in, and it's moving our industry forward. And so I think it's summits like these, we're having to talk, and within the agency, we're talking too. And I think OTT is a great place where it's bringing everything together. So back to the whole data thing, I thought I'd take you through how we do buying in the political world at our agency, and how the data, when I've been talking about it, for us, it's the voter file. It's really what drives things. And so when we go into a campaign, we try and get a broad look at what the audience might look like. And we use software now, cross-screen media software, to kind of just give us an overview. This is actually likely voters in New York. And it used to be in political that the voters were 50 and over. And you can see that their media mix, how they're spending their time on the screen, is much different. In the past few cycles, the younger audience is much more engaged in voting. And you can see from this, 176 CTV index. They're spending their time a little bit differently, so our approach has to be different too. So we'll get a general view, and from that we'll get an idea of how the budgets might work out. This is an example, it's a specific voting segment from the Evansville DMA. And you can see here, broadcast but is still affordable. But just kind of give us an idea of how to reach a specific audience, what the best media mix and budget might look like. Now this changes as the campaign goes on. So, like I started off with you guys, we'll usually start a campaign with a benchmark poll just to get an idea of what the voters in that area are concerned about. And then that is then modeled out over the whole voter file. And we'll drill down into some audiences and develop specific messages for them. Now here, as a buyer, this is when I start RFPing if I'm going into an IO situation. And so the device ID matching can happen and we can start targeting. And this whole time, the creative's being developed, and for the specific target, an overall brand message. And then we start delivering to the audience. Now this process goes on and on and on throughout the race very quickly. Things are changed, and then the slides I just showed you get a little bit more specific and change as we go on. I don't know what I just did there. I might have pressed the wrong button. Okay, so this is another case study from this last cycle. This was a congresswoman from Indiana, and we had done a benchmark poll, and we had an overall audience of about 260,000 people we were reaching with a general brand message. But within that, we identified 4 specific audiences that needed some attention, and we developed creative just for them that we showed on OTT as well as digital. And this is an example of one of those. And I would like you to think while you watch it what audience I was trying to target.
Early detection is a lifesaver, so why wouldn't a mammogram be covered for the young women who need it most? Susan Brooks worked with Republicans and Democrats to make a law that ensures that young women like my daughters are covered.
So was it this guy? No. So we were really trying to target women for that creative. And so this brings me into some of the problems that we saw in OTT from this past cycle. Expanding our audience, lookalike targeting, just doesn't work. If we are trying to target an audience, we need that creative to go into it. So if an audience expansion needs to happen for pacing or whatever, I need to know so I can give you different creative. I would totally have given that guy different creative than who, the audience. So anyway, that was a big, big thing. And just like this last panel talked about, when creative and the buyers, the plannings are not working together, things are just not going to be delivered the way it's most efficiently delivered. And this is an example of a really good creative. This was down ballot from a very intense Senate race. And our candidate had a really good message that she needed to get out to independent people. And OTT was a really good way to do it. We just needed more time than we actually could have. So here was the message.
Some jobs are just flat out fun.
I can't
Take
wait.
state auditor.
Yes, internal controls. We're implementing new ones. Wow! I love seeing these numbers increase. They're becoming so engaged. Cool beans. Look at these savings. Yes, you guys are doing great.
Who knew a CPA could have so much fun reviewing processes in state government?
I know it's a new idea, but I think it's going to save us time and money in the long run.
Okay then. Well, it's working. Indiana is now one of the leading states for financial stability and transparency.
Indiana Transparency Portal. Check it out. Building trust, great customer service. You've seen the new Transparency Portal, right? It's amazing! Can you believe it?
Tara Klutz, Indiana's first CPA auditor of state, making the auditor's office more modern, transparent, accountable, and apparently, well, pretty exciting.
Okay, so that whole ad also brings me into one of the next things. That transparency, I think, goes really well into the thing that nobody liked to admit, but there is fraud in OTT. There's fraud in digital, and just denying it or not talking about it does no good. And being a political buyer, I need my impressions to be delivered to who they need to be delivered to, not the bad guys. And so some of the providers have, money back, fraud-free guarantee. Well, in political, that does me no good after Election Day, especially if my candidate lost. Like, here's some money back. Sorry, this was not taken care of during the race. So working together, I think, with the buyer and there being transparency, we can nip the fraud in the bud. We can identify if it's happening. But just saying, oh, no, we have it all taken care of, don't worry about it, isn't kind of where we want to be going. I think just keeping it upfront and transparent would really help. And so we've talked about this before. For us in political, I had some races. This actually kept me up some nights. we're pacing. We just weren't pacing. Some of our targeting was very granular, and we're waiting for those people to get online and click and see the ad, and they just weren't doing it. And so I think when we enter into an agreement, a conservative estimate on impressions is much better than the maximum impressions. And we can always add more, but I don't want, we talked about over-delivering and stuff. I don't want my frequency caps to be ignored just because of a pacing problem, because we do want that good experience. So that was another thing for OTT that I did have a little bit of issues with. Thankfully, all my campaigns did end up delivering. And we did have some trouble with that. And so as I'm starting to close, we've been talking about data and targeting and planning all being extremely important, but it's not everything. This example is not from the midterms. It was from the presidential, and I know for a lot of us in this room, it seems like just yesterday, and it's raw, but this is an example. This was a Joss Whedon ad, and it was a celebrity video. And in case you don't remember it, this is a cut-down version just to remind you.
On Tuesday, November 8th, this country will make one of the most important
decisions in its history. You have a chance.
You have an obligation
to be a part of that decision.
You might think it's not important. You might think you're not important.
So when we heard that you think you're not important, we knew we needed to respond quickly. In political advertising, we're trying to motivate people to do something. We're trying to fire them up. And so we knew that we needed to do something right away to respond to that. And so there was no time for data to tell us this. We just did it. We posted it on YouTube, and within 48 hours, it had over 15 million views. And this was the response.
Thanks, famous actors, because it's times like these when we realize just how lucky we are to have
famous Hollywood actors.
To guide us.
To guide us.
They know stuff we just don't know.
Stuff we can't know.
Because we're not famous actors. And they're not just acting smart.
They are smarter.
They are smarter.
And thank goodness they made it clear that we must vote for Hillary.
I could have made a terrible mistake without their help.
I thought Clinton deleting all those emails was
dishonest and corrupt.
And put our national security at risk.
But now we know it was all just an accident.
Just an accident.
It was just an accident.
An accident that could happen to any of us. I mean, who among us
couldn't accidentally hit the delete button 30,000 times?
30,000 times?
30,000 times.
Okay, so in conclusion, we've heard this whole summit that data can inform our decisions, it can direct our decisions, it can validate our decisions. But one thing we know that data does tell us is creativity can trump everything. So with that.
Karen, thank you very much.
We have time for some questions.
Yeah. Hi. I was just curious about what the fraud was you were seeing in OTT. Was it bot fraud, or was it just that the ads weren't going to the right people?
Well, fraud that I saw, an example would be we were getting a lot of impressions on an anime channel. And being a buyer, like I knew that, 20,000 impressions in a day to this channel was not right. And, it's like, no, they're just like almost like that creative. There's no fraud in OTT. It's like that's where your audience is. That's what they're watching. And I knew that target independent women audience were just not watching that much anime. So that would be one example.
So is that more of an issue with the partner you were working with?
Yeah, who is defrauding you, the seller or bad actors?
Yeah, because that I guess when I think of fraud, I think of bot fraud or not real people seeing my ad rather than the partner putting you in programming that is not where you want to be.
Well, it was based kind of, I think, on programmatically, and it was supposed to be, you know, these people are tuning in. So it could be also other things would be Roku channels or whatever, looking like a Roku device was, but it really wasn't. Or too many impressions served to a certain IP address. I also saw that. And the more transparent, the more I could look and be like, this isn't what our audience is doing or whatever, and we could nip it in the bud. And then make sure that the impressions were, if it was 10,000 impressions, being actually served to the right audience and stopping that.
Since the OTT channel can be used in targeting a level, especially with a voter file, of a level of precision that's closer to social than it is to traditional linear, how did you view the messaging and the goal here? Since very often on social, the goal for political advertising is often activating the base and getting out the vote or firing up the base. It looked like you were doing persuasion ads on OTT, even though you were able to target your own base there.
Well, for OTT, we used it more, you have your two ends that you don't need to worry about. The people are definitely going to be out voting for your candidate, and the people are definitely going to be out voting against your candidate. And so we really tried to use OTT to be an independent message. So to kind of, you know,
you were trying to move the needle in terms of, you were trying, these were persuasion ads as opposed to others, because I think when we did our political event in January, one of the things we were hearing from the last cycle was how much social was focused on activating the base and less as a persuasion channel this time, and TV was being used more as a persuasion channel.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions?
What were some of the, how much was context at all important here? Within OTT, were you picking and choosing particular shows, channels? Was context important to effectiveness? Or were you simply going for was the targeting really driving this?
Targeting really drove us. Every once in a while, I would not want to have the overnight day parts. Mm-hmm. I like to try and stop those because I wanted my audience to hopefully be in a good mood when they were seeing the ad. Mm-hmm. So not being able to sleep and then being served the political ads, I did try to stay away from that, but I did try and trust the targeting as much as I could.
You weren't able, and as we were talking about OTT yesterday, one of the things that people discuss is the ability to tie OTT exposures to online behaviors. Were you doing any I know there's limited visibility and the ways that political campaigns work and how they actually can measure effectiveness, but in this case, were you able to connect OTT exposures to any other kinds of online behavior or hit them again with display ads or other types of online video ads so that you had either a cumulative effect or you had a sense that you were moving the needle of activity and interest in somebody?
When we were doing some of the digital buying too, sometimes the candidate will have a different targeted victory or another company doing digital, and we're doing more the linear and OTT maybe, video. When we were doing the digital too, and I was partnering with the digital platform to do the OTT, we could see a little bit more, but mostly it's offline polling. You know, is the brand awareness going up in a particular audience offline?
I'm going to put you, I'm sorry, this might put you on the spot because this is a really hard question that we always have a problem with here is Brabender Cox is working with other is working with brands as well and public affairs. Mm-hmm. How are you able to take the specific lessons from working on political campaigns in OTT, and where are they applicable to other kinds of categories?
Well, just speaking from an OTT buyer's perspective, it's my little areas. I think it's targeting specific audiences, it's so powerful and good. And there's some video development that's just, you know, it's kind of meant for that environment, like that Tara Klutz, the auditor. So, but others, it's just too general. It's not really going to do a lot of.
MA, that also is applicable, say, to retail, where, say, they're trying to target jail, and
That's part of DT.
Again,